Welcome to Season 9 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal? To share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you are here and hope it is the highlight of your day. Hello, everyone. This is the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast with Brent Wright and Joris Peels. However, Joris is not with us today, so I have another co-host and a co-worker and a co-designer, and her name is Katie Richmond. She works with me at Advanced 3D, doing some super cool things and super talented, and we'll get to hear from her a little bit later on as well. And speaking of Advanced 3D, though, Advanced 3D is the sponsor of this show for this season. So, Katie, do you know anything about Advanced 3D?
Yes. Having joined just coming up on 3 months ago, I've really enjoyed getting to work on multiple different projects, from concept design, patient specific, to much broader. If there's a problem that you need help trying to work through the digital workflow, whether that's something you want us to handle from start to finish, or you want to learn free form and, kind of take things into your own hands, we will help you figure out how to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think one of the cool things about Advanced 3D is that we meet you where you are. If you've never scanned before, we can help you choose how to scan. If you want to start designing, you can do that. If you want to do FDM 3D printing, we can help you with that. Really, anywhere in your journey along the way, we can help with that. And Katie has the heart of a teacher. She's also a certified prosthetist and orthotist, and a technician. Been doing this for a while. And so really seeing the whole gamut of traditional fabrication versus additive manufacturing, where it makes sense, where it may not make sense. Advanced 3D can help you there. So I'm really looking forward to the show today. We've got Tom Cutler on. And this is going to be a fun and entertaining podcast. But one of the things that I really appreciate about Tom, and he's owned his own company for a while now. He does a lot of stuff in research. He's a certified prosthetist, biomechanist. Most of the stuff that Tom says goes over my head, but I know that I like it. And so, one of the ways that we got to know each other was really talking around not only some of the flexible sockets that we're doing, but then some of the history of transfemoral prostheses, what is right, what is not right. And I think one of the things that we agree on is that everybody has a responsibility in a good outcome for patients. And that includes the surgeon, the physical therapist, and obviously us. And so we have a great discussion around how that kind of team can create great patient outcomes. So, Tom, thanks for coming on the show. And as you know, we always ask the question, how did you get involved in prosthetics and orthotics?
Well, it was part of a work release program from rehab. No, I'm kidding. I was a geologist, and but I'm really more of a people person because I'm joking around, and I wasn't happy. So it was really dumb luck and a phone call from my mom, and she had been a muralist at an orthotist's house, and I get this call, and she goes, "Tommy," and I'm like, "Yes," and she says, "I found a perfect career for you." See, as a kid, my dad was known for breaking your toys just trying to put the batteries in. So at 6 years old, if I wanted to play with my big wheel instead of just the box, I had to put it together myself at 6. And my mom goes, "I found a perfect career for you." "What is it?" And my mom, she's like, I forget what it's called. I'm like, she's adorable. And I go, what is it? And she goes, well, I met this man and I don't know what it's called, but he makes paralyzed people walk. And I go, Mom, that's called a faith healing, you know? So, but that was, he was worked with RGOs, reciprocating gait orthosis and spinal. And I got into the field that way. Ended up going to Dominguez for my orthotics program. This was before they had the masters. And then after going there, did my residency, and then went to Northwestern for prosthetics. Absolutely loved prosthetics and orthotics. I did, but then when I got back and opened my here in the middle of nowhere, California, Bakersfield and Fresno are kind of the armpits of LA. So I guess I'm the sternum because I'm right in the middle, in Visalia. So that was kind of it. I opened up in 2003, and then I did that. The rest is history, as they say.
So that's on the prosthetic side of things. When did you really start with the biomechanist sort of thing?
Oh, 2014, I had a patient that I fit him with the leg, but he was about to blow out his other knee. So I put him in the pool. After 1 month in the pool, this guy went from walking 5 minutes to 45 minutes. Okay, just by putting him in the pool. He worked out a contracture from 45 to 20 degrees. He went from walking 100 feet to 400 feet. Everything changed. And I decided to write a journal article about combining skeletal capture. So with the hi-fi socket, really grabbed the femur. So I thought, oh, you grab the femur, you can rely less on the brim, whatever. And um, I didn't know to start my journal article, so I started it at the surgery. Because where else do you start? And when I went and looked at the surgery after being in practice for 15 years, my I'm still shocked to this day because they intentionally weaken the hip abductors. And I go, why are you taking away the power that I need to support body weight? And they go, oh, well, we need to balance the hip. But it's not functional balance. Functional balance is one, one side, one leg muscles against the other leg muscles. And they were balancing the outer leg versus the inner leg. And so they removed the IT band from the outside of your leg and put it on the inner thigh. And I finally, after being in clinic for 15 years, go, wait, that's wrong. And they said, Joe, Tom, shut up. I mean, it's not the first time I've been told to shut up, but I said, no. I'm already shocked by the results I got from my patient. So I was like, no, I want an answer. And the more I asked, and I was like, what am I missing? They didn't have any answers. And finally, 6 months later, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons admitted that I was right about something I found in their model of the hip. It doesn't have a horizontal force. They only have vertical. And I said, wait, what about the snow angel? If you move your leg laterally, like a snow angel, I don't see that in your model. And and so they go, it's fine. But then I said, oh wait, actually look, mathematically, your model of the hip violates fundamental math because your muscle attaches to the femur, but if it's a teeter-totter, the pivot is the femur. And you're not allowed in the math. I mean, this is all the math, you're not allowed to separate them out. So when you combine them, the distance of that kid on the teeter-totter is zero. and anything times 0 equals 0. And then I go, oh, turn your hip model sideways 90 degrees, and it changes from a teeter-totter to a different type of lever. And then I go, you combine them with a pulley, which is a different machine. And then when I'm trying to explain it, I went back to the biomechanics book, and they didn't include pulleys or wedges or anything except levers. So biomechanics is like a 5-year-old that has a hammer. And you go, buddy, buddy, you need a screwdriver for this. No, hammer. Buddy, come on. You need a wrench. I got a hammer. And what I found is that because biomechanics from the very beginning only used levers, everything is a lever. And then so I was like, wait, you guys have the wrong hip model, and you don't include the IT band in your model, and you don't have anything. And then I went, look, so now, and the best way I explain it is, let's say that everybody had that bad relationship growing up, and that one moment when you're like, wait a second, he's not a sweetheart, he's a jerk, right? Everything changes, and you see everything with a whole different set of assumptions. I always assumed that biomechanics had all the answers. All I did was I stopped and stepped back and said, wait a second, this word, on The Princess Bride, it was inconceivable. Because this word, I don't know that it means what you think it means. And so when they talk about the rockers of the foot, I just went back and looked at where did you come up with rocker? And it was in 1974 with Jacqueline Perry. She used it as a metaphor. But there's no such thing as a rocker. It's not one of the mechanisms. But and I was like, I was talking. So this is what I did was I was told that there's a problem with the socket if the patient is struggling. Now imagine 15 years later, I find out it's not the socket, it's the surgery. I spent 15 years being the scapegoat. Anytime there was a problem, nobody's comfortable pointing at somebody else, but everybody is comfortable pointing at this leg. And I put my heart and soul into that. So I mean, now granted, if there's a problem, we're going to make money by replacing it. So, I mean, don't feel too badly for us. But I was like, I did everything I could. I was furious because I said, you can't hurt my patients and then blame me. And then I started looking at the background and I realized that Frank Gottschalk, and I emailed him 8 times. I was like, dude, and I got like one sentence response. So I tried to include him. And I said, now that you're retired, can we talk? I want you part of taking this to the next level. I got nothing. So I'm okay. He ignored an amputee orthopedic surgeon by the name of Perry Rogers, who said, oh, weight bearing is the benefit of being a knee disarticulation amputee, because he's an amputee, Perry Rogers. And if you look, and I have the book, I'm showing you the book, the visual lower extremity amputations. He talks about all the benefits, and Frank Gottschalk plain ignored the orthopedic surgeon amputee. And he goes, no, it's the attachment of the adductors, which don't even fire. And everything about amputation surgery is wrong. Now, when I say everything is wrong, there's no skeletal support. Now, what other surgery or condition in medicine allows patients not to stand on bones? Nobody. Now, where else do they go? Well, they started leaving the bone marrow open, which bone marrow is 80% fat. So you would get fat embolism syndrome, which causes a huge spike in cardiovascular mortality. So where else are you just allowed to leave a bone open like a sewage pipe in the body? But the final straw was they weakened my joints. Now I'm going to do one thing. Okay. I don't know if you've ever had, we're going to do a group activity. Okay. Can I have you guys both stand up? Can I have both of you stand up on one leg? Okay. All right. Just on one leg. Good. Now bend your hip and knee 15 degrees. And ready? Can you feel the difference? Okay, stand up again. Okay, kind of relax. Yeah, whatever. Now bend it. And you feel that 15 degrees is your IT band turning off. Okay? I found out from an article in 1947 in the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery that there are two separate hip configurations. And in fact, I'll make this relevant to the prosthetists. If you give your patients a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch heel, you will relax a typical gastroc contracture and your patient will be able to double their standing time. Diabetics have gastrocnemius contractures. It tightens up. We all know gastroc is, gets tight. And it buckles the knee. The gastroc contracture will buckle the knee, and I found it in the liver. Buckling the knee removes your patient's ability to stand for casting. So what I found is your IT band and tensor fascia lata is actually the primary muscle for walking on flat ground. It's removed from every one of our patients.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, we've covered a lot there. So I'd love to take some of those points because I mean, obviously there's a rewind to the podcast stuff, and there's a lot there. But so let's go back to you had the patient and it was in the pool, and then let's just take it one at a time. So you've got the IT band, and they cut the IT band off. But what does that do for the prosthetist, and what does that do for the people wearing the socket?
So it turns out, and I'll show you guys here. You see your IT band, okay? Your IT band is actually an abductor of the tibia. Do you see that? If it attaches below the knee, it abducts the hip below the knee. So what is 30% of the hip doing down here? When we look at the hip, the only thing we look at is where the femur and those connect. But if 30% of your hip is down here, and that's where the abduction occurs, then you have a counter force of holding it in. When you cut the IT band, I had to do arts and crafts. This is funny because I really did have to do this before the orthopedic surgeons believed me. And the people that are listening, I apologize if you can't see it. Oh, but
We're going to have to get some pictures, so we'll put this in the show notes.
Okay, great. So what I found as I'm trying to attach my abductors to my hip model is I had to do I'm gonna have you pause this for a second. Let me get a rubber band. Did I have too much coffee today?
We haven't even got started, have we, Tom? I haven't said, Tom.
I should have actually.
I haven't said that enough yet.
I know, right? So, Katie, okay? Katie, do you see that right there? The femur moving sideways?
Yep.
This is just a picture of the leg. And we have this big horizontal force that all of us see. What I found is that it's actually the IT band that pushes holds the IT band is actually what holds the femur in place. And when you remove the IT band, suddenly the femur is able to abduct. So the IT band is the key to everything. And they remove it from every one of my patients. And Frank Gottschalk, 5 years before he took it away from all of our patients, wrote an article where he said it's the most important abductor of the hip. So I have a book that I'm showing here, Biomechanics of Movement, which is at biomech.stanford.edu, and it's missing the IT band in the book. It's simply not there. So biomechanics just left it out. They just didn't include it because they didn't know how it fit. And then my smoking gun, kinesiology, this textbook that I'm showing, is Don Newman's Kinesiology of the Musculoskeletal System. And in fact, it was one of the books that was used at one of the prosthetics programs. It was in Hartford. And I have an email from 2018 from the guy that wrote the book. And he goes, Tom, we don't even know what the function of the IT band is. I'm like, wait, so the guy that wrote the book admits to me on Halloween 2018 that he didn't even know what it does. And they take it away from every one of my patients. And they take away skeletal support and they leave the bone marrow open. And I'm like, wait, guys, we need to fix this. It turns out that in page 49, let's see, this is 4970, 4968, 4978 of Rutherford's, but that's the atlas for the vascular surgeons. Turns out only 10% of dysvascular transfemoral amputees or geriatric amputees, only 10% of them use their legs. Okay? I didn't want to believe it. Now, when I did, it turns out, and I talked to Autobach, and they were like, yeah, well, only 30% of amputees get legs. 2/3 of those leave them in their closet most of the time, and we get 10%. Imagine we could get that up to 50%. Then, or 40%. You just quadrupled how many legs you're fitting. You just quadrupled the number of seals. That's revenue. Now, if you just gave them a base of support, skeletal support, then you wouldn't be chasing volume after the fitting. You'd cut down 75% of delivery follow-ups. So not only do you have more revenue up front, but you've got better productivity. And you have the opportunity to now start getting that much more creative in socket designs. Imagine a socket with an open frame. Now, I want to have this conversation, and but it starts with, hey, there's a problem with the surgery. And if you have a problem with the surgery, you can't fix those problems with the socket, right? And what they, and the problem they came up with was osseointegration. They said, get rid of the socket because the socket was the source of all problems. And all I said is we need to have a conversation. And I have tried since 2016 to start the conversation properly. I've been rejected from bringing the topic up at conferences at the National Academy Conference. 4 times I submitted. I went to the president of the academy. I was like, people, we got to have this conversation. And you're right. They go, oh, Tom. Now, what I don't have is anybody that engages because it is such a huge call to action. If it turns out that the surgery is the source of a ton of our problems, then all of the research now becomes suspect. And people would be like, oh my gosh, freak out. Like, what do you mean freak out? You just justified the need to get more funding dollars for O&P. Just had a chance to start over again. That's talking about tons of money flowing. And but they won't.
So I want to go back to the IT band. You take it off. Now, with it inserting distally on the tibia, that's what keeps everything in. So what you're proposing then is to keep the IT band intact with something distally, right? So I guess that's the part. So I got the teeter totter part, right? But like, if the teeter totter doesn't have a connection to prevent the abduction, how do we harness the IT band when you take that joint away and the anchor point away that was distal?
I'm with you. So what happened was when they cut the IT band, it flew laterally, and it's like, well, yeah, you need to harness that power. They didn't say that. They just freaked out and said, what's going on? Make it go away. And they took the IT band and put it on a medial thigh to hold it. If you want to, the IT band can function like the rope holding the is it the on a sailboat. So if you have a boom or if you have a mainstay, you tie it down at the end of the of the of the of the stick, right? If you're only trying to hold the sail at the mast, it's almost impossible. And that's where your glutes attaches way up at the top. You have nothing attaching at the end. So my answer was not to go through the skin, but was to say, hey, why don't we just use the bone cap that they had in the 60s to address bone spikes, apply 60 years of joint and hip replacement implants. We've been doing this for decades, 65 years. So let's just cut let's just cut in amputees. Let's cut them in on the action. And it's a simple radiator cap. And I have a show here. It has weight bearing and it has an anchor, physical anchor to attach the IT band to the lateral femur. That's it. It's a radiator cap for the leg. You're going to cap it off. So you're going to do two things by doing that. You're going to prevent fat embolism syndrome and you're going to restore 80% of the blood supply to the femur. They didn't discover transcortical vessels until 2019. So they knew arteries in the 1600s. That's how your body gets blood, but they didn't discover how your bones get blood until 2019. But when you open it up and leave it open like they do for amputees, you don't have any pressure. By capping it off, you restore pressure for health. By capping it off, you have weight bearing. So now, if you have weight bearing, you actually have better consistency as far as fit. You have better stability. If you have weight bearing, you're getting the femur in alignment. And then by anchoring the IT band, you actually increase hip power by 44%. Now, that would transform our ability to help amputees, to help them consistently. And I have not even been allowed to bring this up in the JPO. I asked them in 2017 and in 2022, and they're like, no, we won't accept a manuscript from you. We don't have any business challenging amputation surgery. I'm like, okay, oh, Tom, right? So here's the implant.
Okay, so what you're saying is like the what was the surgeon's name that was the amputee?
Paras.
Perry Rogers. So what you're saying is essentially like that knee disarticulation patient, that's what the implant is doing. It still has all the essentially the insertions or the yeah, where the IT band inserts, you can do your muscle attachments on the implant itself. What do you say to people like with the implant stuff and how you put the tissue around distally um, and then bear weight through that? How does that actually work?
Well, you're able to do, um, everybody says, well, you have to do a myodesis. And yet, if you go, there's research in there, and the muscle is 80% water. And when the doctors are being honest, they go, you can't sew anything to something that's 80% water. So the myodesis was speculation in the first place. Let's just be clear about that. And I found you can look in the research where it says myodesis or which is muscle to muscle. And they had orthopedic surgeons saying there's no way that a myodesis would be effective. You can't sew into the muscle and have the anchor hold where you're holding up body weight. So you're able to to provide good coverage. You're able to anchor the IT band to have more power, but it's simply a radiator cap on the end of the leg that lets you put weight. I think the fascinating thing, Perry Rogers, as a knee dysartic amputee and an orthopedic surgeon, goes, why are you guys bad mouthing the knee dysartic surgery? And he said, it turns out it was us. The prosthetists were complaining about cosmesis and clearance. So, for our benefit, they said, okay, we have to give them clearance, so let's shorten it. And it was the prosthetist, and that's in his research. He goes, listen, it's because of clearance that you have to shorten it, but there's a huge benefit by being able to stand. Frank Gottschalk came along in the 80s, and by that point in time, Perry Rogers passed away and wasn't there to correct him. And so we didn't have a chance to give us the best of both worlds, where you could get clearance, but still have weight bearing.
Yeah, I have always wondered. I mean, I can specifically go back to 2014 thinking, why would I have to choose? Because we do limb lengthening surgeries, we do replacements. And even if you don't want to use an implant, in my head, while you're doing the amputation, why couldn't you could still do a gritty Stokes. You could still use the kneecap if you want to keep it biologically the patient's, but cut out a chunk and you get the weight bearing and you get the length by removing some portion of the femur. So you get the benefits of the knee dysartic, the weight bearing, and still a decently long lever arm, which we all want. It's just so interesting because I've never heard anybody talk about this before. And I'm like, yeah. And then you remove the equation of, oh, the knee is so damaged or the problem is so great that it's okay if you weren't a knee dysartic candidate in the beginning. Now, here, don't worry about that. If you don't have the femur to use an implant. It's interesting.
So I have an answer for you. And there's there's two things. One, we are not allowed to weigh in as prosthetists. Your job as a prosthetist is to be the scapegoat. If the role of the scapegoat, so that you know, is, and there's something fascinating called mimetic desire theory, and I learned about the role of the scapegoat is to allow everybody else on the interdisciplinary team to get along really well. So it allows the physical therapist and the nurse and the doctor and the patient support family, we serve to allow everybody else to get along, because this is kind of awkward when you realize we don't have all the answers. So the answers that you have is that their claim is that the knee has to have it has to be big and wide for weight bearing. Okay. So you have to leave the full length of the femur for weight bearing, to which I respond, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense at the calcaneus. It's very small. So when I land on the heel, it turns out maybe it should just be. So that's why a lot of the other implants have had big, wide, bulbous things. The other, but even more so, here's your big ad. This changed everything for me. Okay. Katie, how much does the surgeon get paid to do amputation surgery?
Jack diddly squat.
You know what the number is?
Not much.
Yeah, it's under 1,000. When I first did this, it was about $740. Suddenly, everything became clear to me. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to listen. And I go, oh, now how much do people make on a regular hip implant? From $12,000 to $15,000. So now, and then for the first 4 years, you get an extra 65% bonus on an innovative medical device. Suddenly, everybody's thrilled. And I was like, oh, so that's you're right. I kept going on. I was presenting in 2019 at at the Florida conference about the surgery, and I realized, Tom, don't be just a whiner. What's the answer? And I was like, well, the answer is just obviously just to get a cap, right? Here's an implant, and that's your solution. I never intended to make any money off of it. I filed the intellectual property, filed the patent just so it would contain the something. Found it financially worthwhile to develop a solution so I could get back to my clinical. I I offered to assign, and I have the emails to prove it. I went to the academy and I was like, guys, I can't do anything by myself out here in California is not great for business. So look, I'll assign my patent rights to the academy. It turns out it's a $500 million market. So even if you get a 3% royalty, that's $15 million a year that could go towards research and grants and scholarships, who knows? And when I offered it to my, please, will you guys get this available for our patients? Can you advocate? And I got naturally, oh, Tom. And they go, that's not what we do. I'm like, what? What's not what you don't win? I'm like, why wouldn't you want to have money? And anyway, so I've been trying to get this, and a lot of times as a prosthetist, it's very difficult. You know?
So with the implant, what is the process to go? I mean, you've got to get some surgeons on board essentially, and then there's probably some clearance sort of things and that sort of thing to happen. But there is some precedence, right? Because they're like the osseo integration side of things, you don't automatically go get osseo integration, right? There are some people that don't have a complete setup that have actually done well in sockets. Am I right on that?
So, I actually had one of my patients get osseo integration. And so I reached out and I was like, Dr. Brammer, can you give him his IT band back? I was trying to email him. And he, on the day of surgery, he's like, what am I supposed to do about this Cutler guy? I'm like, well, you're supposed to talk to me, buddy. And so I was like, hey, you don't dump it on your patient on his most vulnerable day, right? And so I started looking at his stuff. It turns out there was a 15 article about osseointegration on 5-year follow-up. And in figure 5, they were saying, here's the article. And they said, well, the overwhelming majority have little or no trouble. And it's only available for 6% of 6.6 of amputees. We don't have anything available for the 93.4% of amputees that are dysvascular. And I looked at figure 5. What do you mean overwhelming majority have no problem at all? And then it turns out that even after they removed 8% of the implants, that in figure 5 in the bottom, they still had like 18% of the patients had considerable trouble. And then I had to go look that up. And that was an extreme reduction in quality of life. So at 5 years, you got 25% of the patients either had the implant pulled out or have an extreme reduction in quality of life. And so, and they have a 55% surgical revision rate at 5 years. So when they have the Keep Walking implant, is a 6-inch long. It allows them to keep walking because they have a weight bearing surface while they're waiting for the second stage. And they found that 87.5% of those patients are like, no, I don't want to go for the through the skin. I'm happy. They had weight bearing and they're like, I don't have any problems. They were walking 25% faster. They had 82% less pain. They reported more stability. And in the Canadian journal, Prosthetic Orthotic Journal, they actually found that the most cost effective implant was an internal implant, better than not giving them anything and more cost effective than percutaneous implants. But we aren't allowed to have that conversation really. It's like, hey, what about something for all the dysvascular amputees? And I spoke to one of the surgeons at University of Utah. I happened to catch her on vacation. She was in Palm Desert on vacation. And I said, yeah, I've got this implant. Can I bring it? Can I show you guys this implant? And she finally was like, wait, but that doesn't get rid of the socket. Doesn't that tell you something? The goal was never make their life better. The goal was always get rid of the socket. And I'm like, no, I want to help. These are my friends. If they want to go percutaneous, then fine, let's do that. But if what they really need is the ability to have good clearance, have weight bearing, if we can give them back their primary muscle for flat ground walking, then why aren't we doing any of this? So, and if the company Takir that's doing the Keep Walking implant is in Valencia, Spain, and I think you have a buddy that lives there.
Yeah. Well,
That's where you're.
yeah, we'll have to see about hearing from him. That would be interesting, and that's
We'll send him down there.
that's right, because I think they're in the same. I think they're in the same town. That would be wild. That would be funny.
They're in the same town.
That is hilarious. Okay.
Last thing I'm going to tell you. Here's what I'm going to tell you. And when people are going, oh, Tom, the IT band, the tensor fasciolata is the muscle, and the IT band is the super long ligament. And if you were to go to Michael Pohl, Pohl, 2015, did a nerve block where he did an experimental nerve block to weaken the glute muscles. Okay, in 2015, I don't know where it is. I got a copy. And when he did a nerve block that weakened the glutes, he said there were no changes in their gait. And he emailed me, goes, yeah, nobody wanted me to print that. But they were walking on the flat ground of the gait lab. If they'd put the patients walking down a hill, when you're walking downhill, your knees and your hips stay bent. They would have gotten exactly what they expected to see hiking downhill, just not on flat ground. There's two different systems, and that's not reflected in biomechanics or in gait.
Let's hop into just a little bit of the history of like socket design that has tried to correct some of that stuff, which has been a little bit interesting, right? You've got the issue of containment, you've got the hi-fi stuff, you've got what Long did with the super adduction of the socket on healthy patients. I do understand that as well, and and I'd love to hear, even through your journey of the 15 years, socket wise, how do we work with what we have given right now? Obviously we want weight bearing, we want the IT band and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Or is it a little bit of a lost cause?
I'm very gregarious and familiar with my patients. I do everything to bring myself down to their level. So you get much better data when they'll be blunt with you, but whereas they won't say something. So I would get down in front of them and I'd put them in a chair and I'd say, okay, have your leg kind of out to the side, your thigh, and they would abduct their femur. And I say, push against my leg. And they would push against it. And I go, great. Now bring it in and, adduct, towards the middle. And they would do that. I go, now push against my leg. And they go, wow. It goes stronger, right? So it turns out that we have been told it puts the muscles on stretch, right? You want to adduct your socket to put the muscles on stretch. Sure, maybe that's part of it. But what I figured out is only for the hip is there a linear slope on that line. It turns out that you actually increase your leverage once you start looking at the femur lever. Adduction is important, but it's important because it increases the leverage of the muscle on your femur. But we've never looked at it because we only look at the vertical. We never look at the horizontal. So adduction is important, not because of muscle stretch. It turns out that the neck of the femur is what puts displacement from the so center of rotation is in the middle of the ball, right? Okay, so if you're looking at the ball of the femur, and then if you look at where the muscle attaches is way over to the side. And so as they step onto so adduction, bottom line, adduction is important because it provides more power. Socket design, we need to hold the femur there. And if you're not allowed to touch the bottom of the socket, how are you supposed to hold the femur? Of course, it's going to slosh laterally through the tissue, right? And because their model doesn't have any horizontal forces in their hip, it's covered up by the IT band.
Mm-hmm.
So they have no horizontal forces in their hip model. Literally, I was like, "Where's the horizontal?" When you go to it's because they only measured at the ground. When you get up to the hip, it's 60% of your body weight thrusting laterally. They don't have it in their models. So Hi-Fi started putting these vertical struts on either side of the quads, either side of the hamstrings, and started exploiting all that real estate below the brim. And what I found is if you're going to go subischio, it's not necessarily just for the bony lock, but you have to have that weight bearing. When you're going subischio, you lose that critical support. So with socket design, you got to grab the femur better, and I do that with Hi-Fi. I could do subischial or I could do ischial containment. I always wondered about vacuum, and it's not my area of expertise, but when you have that proximal lateral gapping and the wobbliness, you don't have that with vacuum. But that means that you're using the vacuum to hold to the skin so that you don't get that coupling action. That makes sense? And so, anyway, so when it comes to socket design, yeah, I'm a big believer in it. And I love the Hi-Fi, but then I was like, why are my patients still struggling with the Hi-Fi? Why are my patients saying, Tom, give me my ischial containment back? And I listened to my patients. They are supposed to have all of their hip power, but they never did. So I think once we fix the surgery, then we can get into a socket discussion. But everybody argues about sockets, and I'm over there raising my hand going, great. You've all been screwed over by the surgery, and now you're bickering about your sockets. Makes life suck the least. I'm like, let's go back to the beginning.
So let's look into the crystal ball a little bit, into maybe some what if stuff. I know you and I have kind of just talked about some of that, and just let's talk about a dream scenario. So let's say we get some the implants on some people. What do you see as far as, and I mean, you're not, this is, yours will kill me if I don't ask about additive manufacturing, specifically what you're doing. I mean, I know you said, hey, Brent, I think what you're doing is pretty cool, but in your practice, you know, are you doing any? Is it something that you're interested in? What are you seeing? And then where do you see where this crossroads of implant and um, additive manufacturing help, both ways?
So let's look at the future. It turns out that the a bone cap is actually the lowest, the safest classification level with the FDA, and there is a pathway that allows you to start clinical trials to do probably 10 of them right away without even having to do an IRB or get FDA approval ahead of time. It is a custom device exemption pathway, and it lets you do it right away. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for additive manufacturing. And there's been a big push for 3D printing of hip implants and doing the bespoke anatomically correct in the field of orthopedics. And you can imagine, remember, I've been telling on the problems in biomechanics that have harmed us. Those same problems from biomechanics have actually prevented the 3D printed implants from recognizing their actual value. It's when we go to it that the ruler you're using is broken. So when we take it to the biomechanics people, there's a problem, but it has nothing to do with 3D printing. I would love to see the implant in patients, and my boys are graduating. I'm in California where nobody wants to do business. And so really what I've done is um, I've been actually scaling back my clinic so that I can actually go elsewhere. I'm poised to find a place to watch this take off. And that's why it's very difficult. It's been very difficult for me to help patients knowing that they've already been harmed by a suboptimal surgery.
I have many strong women in my life who are in the medical field. And one of the things that I'm thinking about doing next year, if possible, is attending a conference of women in healthcare, and like the being ignored you are describing. I'd be interested to know who you have talked to, and there may be a benefit in talking to those who have been ignored themselves. And I don't know, I know that's kind of vague, and
Actually, that's called the hidden profile principle. Oh gosh, yes. Okay. So the hidden profile principle in psychology is where we get the echo chamber from. And when somebody comes in with a unique perspective, they found that everybody else wanted to talk about what everybody knew. Nobody wanted, they only gave lip service to that unique perspective, and then they went right back to the other and ignored it. They found that when everybody has all the information, we're smarter in groups. Okay? They found when one person has the information and everybody else doesn't listen to them, we're dumber in groups, because that one person, a lot of those people doubt themselves. And that's why the prosthetists have started to doubt, well, maybe it is okay that I balance the inner hip to the outer hip. Maybe it's me. So it's almost like they're being gaslit. And so I have spoken to anybody and every Danielle Melton. I chatted with her back in I think it was last March. She got it more than anybody else in the but the orthopedic surgeon, the physical therapist, the engineers, none of them. But she was the physiatrist, and because this is interesting. I go, oh yeah. But I challenged orthopedic surgery at UCLA. I got a letter of support from the director of their annex. But when I went to with Dr. Kwong, head of orthopedic surgery at UCLA, he panicked and got real uncomfortable because I was talking about stuff he wasn't aware of. And he got a sterling silver bowl behind him on the shelf. And he goes, look, Tom, I know biomechanics. I taught him this leaving of, an appreciation of teaching biomechanics from Harvard. But I've talked to tons of people and nobody wants to listen. Everybody wants to go get rid of the. I love this nifty idea of coming through the skin. I'm like, yeah, but the patients don't. And so I've talked with, I don't even know how many emails I've tried to go to. You know what I've done? Ready for this, Katie? I, when people in Owen, okay, the problem we have is I've had vascular excited about this, but my own local hospital just couldn't get their act together. To be honest with you, they don't want to listen to us. We're seen as vendors. They thought I was a sales rep. I'm like, I'm a clinician. Um, uh, so I have the vascular surgeons and orthopedic surgeons at us and say, why should we even consider this if the prosthetic community won't acknowledge that there's a problem? You see what I mean? So if O and P won't look at it, if they don't have the courage to say, hey, there's a problem with surgery, then how can you really expect vascular surgeons and orthopedic surgeons to go, oh yeah, we should take a look at this? They're counting on us. Now, not only did I try to present 4 times at the Academy, and now president going, listen, can you please talk to clinical content? I said, look, if I'm wrong, I don't want you to waste your time. If I'm wrong, I'll donate $5,000 or to whatever you want. If I'm wrong. And I did it to NAAOP. I did it to COPA. I did it for Hanger. I said, hey, I'll donate $5,000 to the Hanger Foundation. But if I'm right, and nobody, like, oh, if you're right, we'll give you an hour to speak at one of the guys. They just wouldn't engage. They just say, oh, we can't talk about that. And that's cowardice, not courage. You have to be bold. You have to step up. I've taken incredible hits taking this stand myself. Brent, I, everybody in leadership rolls their eyes. I have all these people in the rank and file that go, Tom, this is amazing. We should do something. I'm like, great, but until our ship, and I kept thinking our leadership could leverage this to get licensed. I want O&P to benefit. O&P is my tribe. If we don't do something with this, now with your podcast, I don't know, maybe get south. But the PT, if they claim or if they want to lay claim, we miss out.
Is this something you're imagining being done at time of amputation for dysvascular patients? Or is this a go in after? Or what? Because the other question then becomes, if I'm a vascular surgeon, we've kind of already, that patient has been in the hospital, sepsis, we're seeing it coming. We have an opportunity to send a custom sized and shaped model to be fabricated in, additive manufacturing. And then does that come back and it's the vascular surgeon who is doing the amputation and putting the implant in, or do we need to involve then an orthopedic? I don't know.
No. So I have an answer for that. Turns out your vascular surgeons are most accustomed to little tiny delicate implants, like a stent, little delicate wires, or with a silicone artery or something. And they look at this and they go, ah. And I had to take a look. I talked to my local surgeons and I'm like, it's a cork. And look at this, right? All it is you're putting a cork in a wine bottle, and then I have it designed so it's intuitive that there's nothing to it. You only need a vascular surgeon. They can have it ready. You have a 2 centimeter diameter. If something ever went wrong, guess what? You do an outpatient procedure, pull it out, and they're back to square one, so they haven't been harmed at all, right? Now, what I found is that these patients are so compromised that that nobody wants to go in after the fact. It's like if they have to have amputation, just put it in. Now, here's the bonus: is if you do this and provide them with weight bearing, the physical therapists now get to develop an entire protocol of weight bearing that simulates hip replacement or knee replacement. Who knows what that is? But you're getting the patient up right away. If they don't even want to use a leg, okay, they don't qualify for a leg. Now, when they want to brush their teeth, they're still only on one leg. Imagine if you gave them a weight bearing surface on it with an implant that they could stand on the seat of their wheelchair and put the other foot on the ground. They're a much lower fall risk when it comes to just ADLs. So it's a very well. I've learned so much through this. I learned that the vascular surgeons freaked out a little, and I kind of said, I was like, Bob, it's a cork. I understand you've never not finished off a bottle of wine, but theoretically, you can put a cork back in a wine bottle. And they go, oh, I guess it is pretty simple. And it's only 1 inch versus all the other ones, which are totally long. And I'm like, and it creates more revenue so that they actually have the time that they can invest. You get better outcomes. We get new socket design.
And maybe it doesn't get pawned off to the lowest man on the totem pole and just get it done. It is a reconstruction. It's not an amputation.
Yes, Katie, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a way to say it. I mean, the reconstruction, you get paid for that kind of stuff. And it will be up there with, say, a hip implant or something like that. And you may even get people like that specialize just in that, and you could have regional specialties that come in and out of hospitals and all that. I could definitely see it. That's cool.
Do you know what the market is?
What's that?
Do you know what the market is?
I think you said 500 million.
I think it was Ashkenazi. Yeah. Okay. Do you guys know it's fascinating when people aren't forthcoming with data, right? That's when they have something to hide. That's the good stuff. The stuff you can't find. What is it? I think it was Aristotle said that science isn't about finding the right answers, it's about asking the right questions. How many transfemoral amputations are done every year? You don't hear that. It turns out, according to Ashkenazi, and I think he's on the board of OSER. So I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but he did an article. But it turns out that 1 million amputations every year in the 26%, 24% are transfemoral. So that's 240,000 to 260,000 amputations every year, according to that data. But you don't find people talking about that. So if we have between 100,000 and 250,000 transfemoral amputations happening every year, then imagine an amazing opportunity it is for one of the implant companies.
I just pulled out the calculator on that one, and I was like, okay, so let's just say you get half of that. That's $750 million. And that's on the low end. Yeah, $5,000 a piece. So it's probably more than
You
that.
don't have to do it for $5,000. I'm saying you get, okay, if a hip implant is getting 12 to 15, so is a knee, then 10,000 for one of these. If you can get 10,000 from insurance, then
So
you
then you
can
double that. So
sell it. You can sell it
1.5 billion.
But yeah, you can sell it for 2,500. Now, it was the company was Signature Orthopedics, and my local surgeon says, "Oh, Tom, yeah, I think I'm on track to do between 40 and 50 amputations this year." You could see the jaw drop on the head of innovation. He goes, that was when he goes, "Oh, this market is diabetics, not soldiers." And I'm like, "Yeah." And that's why they're like, "Hey, we'd love to be part of this." But my local hospital freaked out because here in the middle of nowhere, they've never done innovation. I'm like, "Come on, guys, we have a chance. Let's do this." And they wouldn't do it the same way that I've O&P saying, "Hey, guys, let's get licensure. Let's harness this. Hey, we've been screwed over. What can we get out of this opportunity?" And they go, "Oh, we're not used to doing anything." I'm like, "All right, fine." So that's why I'm so excited. It's been heartbreaking watching what has happened to O&P. I mean, I love it's my tribe, it's my people, and watching how we've taken all these hits, or anytime we have anything, your podiatrists or your orthopedic surgeons, they're going, "Hey, we're trying to have a business as well." They take all of our revenue sources. And how many times does a podiatrist go, "Oh, I can do an arch support better than them, even though I don't have any equipment to do modifications at my office?" And if they've taken that revenue stream, how do they then, can how do they then justify taking it away from you, unless they say, "Oh, I cognitively," they have to then consider us less than, which would justify them fitting all the arch supports themselves instead of sending it to a place that's better qualified. So I don't have any opinions, mind you. Um, but yeah, I want to do, I don't know. That was there's a rant. Okay, where's that soapbox? I don't need any more. You know, what do you,
Well, Tom, this has been great. I think that there needs to be a part two, because one thing that I wanted to get to that we did not get to was the heel lift thing. um, and I think that's important. But we're gonna foreshadow another episode together and talk about that part. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this about the implant, some of the biomechanics of the transfemoral sockets, and I think that's a go ahead.
you said the heel thing? It turns out that the first diabetic shoe study in 1994 by Woolridge had 47% higher amputation rates in the diabetic shoe group than in the control group. It turns out that the diabetics were provided that were flat, put more tension, caused more ulcers, more amputations. So if we would love to get away from doing diabetic shoes. So we'll talk about it later. But yeah, there's more. I kept finding one thing after another. I want to be able to channel it through somewhere, and O&P wants to do.
Well, there's a couple things that's very interesting. I think there's and where I'm encouraged. So yes, we've taken our hits and such, but I would say this new generation of clinicians um, is very interesting. So not only are they I think they are asking the right questions. They're asking why, and is that truly the way it is? um, and they're bringing that into the clinical practice. So I think as that education occurs, there will be more of those findings, right? And then they can look for themselves uh, whether or not um, they want to take in the data and continue on the way that they've always done, or potentially, carve another way. And so I'm really excited about that. And the other thing that I think is very interesting is that CMS has, I don't know if generous is the right word, because it's not. I mean, like, we don't get paid truly for what we do, even though those numbers can be big. But they have given us some validation by not only continuing to raise rates, even though they're small percentages, but they're also saying, hey, we see this going into robotics, exoskeleton. We see additive manufacturing coming in, and we're going to pay for that. And so, out of all the things and the hits and stuff that keeps on coming, I think that there is a tide that is changing where we're really going to be focusing on good patient outcomes, which outcome measure is all the rage. And how cool would it be to have something that increases outcome measures in the prosthetic side of things? And man, if the vendors, Oser, Autobach, all the big guys wouldn't get behind some of this, like I can't. This is another foreshadowing, or it might be after. I don't know which way I'm going to do it, but um, Joris and I broke down the Embla, which is Oser's umbrella. So Embla is the umbrella over Oser and a couple other companies' annual report, and they go through some of these numbers and the amount of people that we're not reaching. So not only in the U.S. but worldwide that need a prosthesis is astronomical. So like that percentage that you said, it sounded low, but they corroborated that in their report. So that's what's interesting about all this. Like, if you can move the needle one little bit and get people up and walking and healthier and all that stuff, that's a win for patients. And so, to me, I've been around long enough, definitely been on the beatdown side of things, but I would say my view, and it may be skewed, but of what I'm seeing with the young people, even some of the young surgeons coming in too, and hearing some of them and their open mindedness to this, to the grand rounds and all that stuff. I would say I'm very excited for the next chapter. Um, uh, I want to be real about it still, but I am very excited about the next chapter, because I think this is where we're going to see a lot of gains.
I think that you and Katie, I think you probably agree that I'd be willing to take a cut on the fee schedule that was then replaced with office visits. If you got paid to do an assessment and they said, okay, you have 10 assessments, we're paying you this much, we're going to take that amount off of the top or whatever, I don't know, okay, then we get actually reimbursed for our for getting those outcomes. Now I'm throwing that out. Who wants to make less money? But until we actually get compensation for the time spent, I think it's going to be very difficult to get people to actually commit to doing it, right? We're motivated by money. I don't know what the answer is. I'm throwing that
Uh,
out.
we agree on a lot of things,
It,
Tom, but I think I 100% disagree with you on the paying for time. Look at what has happened when we have
you don't think we
no
think
we when you look at the fee schedules of doctors and surgeons getting paid for their time. Guess which way they're going? They are getting squeezed like
yeah.
nobody's business. look at our fee schedules. Yes, it sucks, but if you have good patient outcomes,
Right,
and take good care of the patient and fit the patient, you can make those margins work and
oh,
work.
it's much
Yeah.
better. Oh
So
yeah, you can increase the margin.
I am not of this mind. Let's get paid for our time. So we can agree to disagree on that. I'm okay on that, but I would not want to be an orthopedic surgeon in this thing right now. I am 100%. If my kid says I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, I said you better become a prosthetist before that, because their reimbursements are going down.
Here's the best part, Brent, and you're right. And the best part is I love the fact that we're able to even have the conversation. Do you see my point is that so often people aren't willing to just throw stuff out on the table and muddle our way through, because I don't disagree with you in a perfect world. But when I'm looking at how often we are excluded from our own profession, and you have these other people that come in going, I can do bracing and I can do the research and I can lead this. And they don't even, you've got these companies. How about the fact that DonJoy, the knee brace company that, we all know DJO and whatever. I was actually talking to surgical division, and I went to the conference. They don't have a single orthotist on staff. We're not part of the process for everywhere else. My point is, how do we actually have agency in where our field goes, and how do we make sure that we have a voice in what kind of research happens? Because if they bring up dumb stuff, or if they don't actually ask the right questions, then we never make progress. The fact that we just hashed that out and disagreed is great.
So I might be on the minority of that, but I do feel like I feel for this. I feel with the surgeons.
I'm okay jumping into your camp. I do. I agree with you, but I'm right there with you. As I'm not opposed to coming over to your side. I go, yeah, I don't want to give up any money, but I'm just going, geez, how do we move forward? Well, why won't we change? Why won't we be open to a conversation about something?
Yeah. Yep.
That's all.
100%.
And my problem is nobody wants to have conversations about sketchy stuff, but there's so much neat stuff we can do.
Yep.
Anyway.
Well, thanks, Tom, for that. That combination was probably the longest foreshadowing of a second episode we've ever done so far. So thank you. But this has been great. And Katie, thank you for being on.
Of course.
This was super cool, and thank you for your questions and such for Tom around the surgery stuff, because I think that's really important as well. And thank you to our listeners making it all happen. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next time.